All right. Hello, everyone. This is Krystian from Netguru. I'm the AI consulting lead. It seems that we are on air. Today, I have a very special guest, Henry and Jay. Hello, guys. Thanks for being
Good
here.
afternoon.
Hello there.
Hello. So the main topic for our session today is whether you are ready or not for, AI adoption. So before we will jump in, maybe let's do quick introduction round. Maybe we can start from Jay on my screen. So yeah, let's do the introduction round first.
Well, hello. I'm Jay Hawkinson. I am the Senior Director of Data and Analytics at Weston. I've been working with data and analytics and architecture for about 25 years.
Hi, and my name is Henri Winand. I'm CEO and co-founder of Akinova. I've been working on the intersection between data, hardware, regulations, and customer migraines for my whole career across the world of energy, transportation, and now of financial technology and insurance.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much for being here. So let's start with the first question because you are already some time on the market, and we have this very big hype boom for the AI adoption. So I guess you're smiling. So the first question to you is, what is the actual importance of cleaning the data? What is the importance of having that prepared before we will start any development? Maybe this is to you, Henry.
Sure. So look, I remember as far as in the 90s doing an enterprise resource planning, not to mention the software implementation across a FTSE 100, and data cutover was the topic of a conversation for not just many weeks but many months, because there's a great tendency to have rubbish in and rubbish out, but because somehow computers put some pretty pictures or some nice words around it, that suddenly people start to believe it. And so the data quality and the governance, and that's also something hugely important around it. Without that, you don't have a foundation. It's a bit like building, I don't know, a giant, and you decide to put some clay feet. You know what happens the first time turns up, right?
Yeah, yeah. So what is your perspective, Jay? I guess you previously mentioned also that you have some experience from the manufacturing point of view. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that it's data quality is one of those foundational pieces that you need to get right. If you don't have it, you get lost in wrong answers. So it gets worse. You think you have the right answer, but you don't because your data is wrong. There are too many cases that I've had where a simple categorization of a record or something is done wrong and completely change sales forecasts and pieces that are being used to go into an AI type system. Because remember, AI is stupid, if you will, from that respect. It's data. That's their concept of the world. There is no human sitting there saying, well, that number just doesn't look right. It just doesn't happen that way. So it's data quality is foundational, not just to AI, but to so many automation and business processes that we have in play today.
Yeah. So considering that we are witnessing this Gen AI boom, and all those companies or executives are looking for some relevant business cases adoption, and since out of the box, uh, using like large language models may look promising, even like out of the box without any data or with rubbish data. How do you think that Gen AI is changing the perspective of the data? How much this is different than before? What do you think, like currently, when you are witnessing what is happening right now? It can be to Henry, I guess.
Sure. Look, I mean, Gen AI is all the talk in insurance, right? So why is that? Because insurance is made out of contracts. So
Hmm.
it's an intangible, right? You have a piece of paper which is a promise that I may pay you in the future in the event certain bad things happen to you, right? So, of course, everybody's looking at it. So there will be a temptation to say, well, if I can analyze lots of insurance contracts, maybe I can interrogate them better and understand better what they say. Or in claims, I receive a whole bunch of different documentation, and then I can assess whether or not your claim is, fraudulent or not, and respond in a more conversational way to you. So it's absolutely everywhere. There's big conversation around it. I think if I then look at back to the foundations, right? The data quality is what are you training the models on, and are you putting some rules and some guides around it, so that you don't have some inference of what the model will statistically predict that it should say, based on the information. So let me give you some examples. If you look at for instance, in car insurance, motor insurance, huge premium and fairly fundamental for anybody who's driving, right? If I start to analyze a whole bunch of data and contracts associated with Gen AI and so forth, and try to do some inference of something which is very topical, male versus female drivers, you can infer a whole bunch of things when it comes to the driving style, which actually, when you look at the data and you really understand the data and go behind the data and behind the contract, have actually nothing to do with whether you're male or female. But it looks like it's the case, right? And then the chatbot that then gives you the answer as to whether or not your policy has been endorsed or not, then will give you basically utter garbage. So when you look at that, it's really, really important to really understand the data. And what's scary is when you look at insurance, for instance, very few insurance companies have quite the let's say the governance framework around how those data to train the Gen AI model, plus the information to derive the statistics about probability of losses. And that needs to be bolstered before you start to press the button on let's go on the sausage machine of creating lots of Gen AI models, to interface with clients and to do a whole bunch of things.
I see. Do you have, Jay, from your perspective, how the Gen AI makes it different this time? What do you think from the data cleanup or data preparation perspective? How generative AI is different?
Yeah, I think that it's different in the case of, again, as I was saying before, is for AI, data is its entire world. It's its perception, its thing. And when we're looking at it, and when we're dealing with the data as we're training these pieces up, we have our own biases that are also coming into the equation here. So one project I had was on a safety project where we were looking for life-altering events. And I was told by the people that were running this for years and years and years, here are the reasons why these accidents occur. And we want you to make sure that when you're doing these models, we're trying to predict this thing from happening. And the reality had nothing to do with it. It was all incorrect. Their perception and what they were reading out of the data was just wrong. And it was partly because of how they collected the data was all based on forms that people were filling out, and everyone who was filling out the form was doing it their own way and using the simplest words as possible because they didn't want to write out the form. So again, when you take a look at this, data is all important for all these pieces that we're doing, and the higher quality of the data, the better pieces you're going to get. And especially, and where you have to really watch out for, is that it's objective, that it isn't just my version of the truth, it is the version of the truth whenever possible.
I see. So in terms of practical implementation, from your perspective, what are key challenges that companies, organizations should consider before they will start with Gen AI or any AI project? What are the key challenges, pitfalls that you witnessed many times, maybe? Yeah.
For me, what I've seen a lot is that people have this idea that it's a magic wand. It can do anything. They're not looking at the data. They're not looking at the possibility. They're just thinking that this is magic, that you press a button, it all gets done. The first thing is understand it's a process. And even as we're talking about data cleansing and data quality and all these pieces right now, most companies do have decent data somewhere. They're making decisions with it today. So it isn't like what many consulting companies will come in and say, okay, I'm going to spend 5 years helping you clean the data and get you the governance model and all the rest. Now you could use Gen AI. It's not that. There are work areas that you can work on today. But the biggest challenge area that I've seen is culture. For whatever reason, as we've come into this world of ERPs and all the other technology we've put in place, we lost a lot of ability to understand how data flows through processes. When we had different forms and we would pass information from department to department by forms, we were actually in better shape than some of the stuff we're doing today. We have so much automation in place, but unfortunately, because the quality of data is so bad, is because we are making mistakes faster. So one of the biggest challenges, though, is that built-in culture that we have in some of these companies, where people are in silos, only see their process and not how it affects anyone else. And this can be problematic, especially as you start using use cases beyond a single department or function.
I see. So what is your perspective, Henry, in terms of the data quality pitfalls, amount of processing, domain, from practical projects?
Look, I think I'll start to think from I think what Jay was saying about, we have lots of data. I think the challenge is that we're drinking from hose pipes of data, right? So it's a little bit like the old age of when people were selling lots of hardware, they were selling you big data. What people in business require and clients, and customers require is small insights, but an insight that matters. So when I look at an implementation, first I look at the preparation and whether or not the data are fragmented. So we can, let's assume for the minute that the data have some degree of quality that allows your business already to make decisions. So if you start to understand where are those data repositories, how fragmented they are, sometimes something as silly, you have a European thing with a comma and a US or UK thing with a full stop, for numbers. I mean, something as silly as that, small things like this. Once you understand that puts you into really a great place. So I'll give you an example. I think there was a piece of work done by, I think it was IDC recently, which specifically looked at the insurance industry, right? And it looked at 24 proofs of concept that were basically going through. Only 2 of those succeeded, and that's because they looked at the data fragmentation and whether or not the data were okay. So if you think about from 24 to 2, that's quite something. And if you think about the thing that basically kicked quite a few of those also into touch is the lack of what Jay was talking about, that culture, which is actually going back to the governance. And actually in insurance, because it's a heavily regulated industry, you also have to worry about what the regulator is starting to tell you that you should do. So it does not mean, however, that there are not clear-cut use cases where you can put a financial return on investment into it, and you can basically really have some decent returns. And the critical piece in there, have the data, make sure they're not fragmented, make sure you have a clear MVP objective. Don't change the objective halfway through to start to add a whole bunch of features, which basically it's a bit like a warship. You added so many stuff on the top of the warship, the thing capsizes before it gets to the next harbor. So that's the critical nature of how you actually get to delivering something that makes any sense.
So from the company strategy perspective, because I've met like many companies also from the DACH regions recently, and I see that currently there is this trend for not only chief data officer, but also chief data culture officer. So I was wondering, what is the culture and strategic elements? Those could be potentially 2 different questions, but the first thing, like, what is this data culture? What do you think right now? Like, what is the role of modern leadership in, managing those data? I guess this might be to Jay as well.
Yeah, I think that this is an important thing that all leaders have to take a look at. Culture eats strategy every day of the week.
Yeah.
So, however, whatever culture you have in place is going to make or break any of the pieces we need to do. And if you think that you are going to just dictate to everyone that they're going to change their mindset, you're probably going to be very sorely disappointed in the results. You have to take a look at it. And what I do when I get involved with a new organization is look at the cultural pieces that are there and drive my changes through the culture. So I'm doing the path of least resistance. Sometimes it means allowing people to do things that are a little bit stupid. I don't allow them to do anything insane, but I let them do things that are stupid so that it presents the problem so that they can go after it. So from a leadership perspective and a culture perspective, these are critical elements that you need to be able to tread very, very carefully. The idea of getting people to have the right data literacy and do all the pieces that they need to do, it's easier to make that happen on a system side than it is on a people side. But the people side is where it all starts. So we have to do it carefully, do it within the cultures that you have in place, and slowly make changes as opposed to think that you're going to just switch a button and there it's done.
Mm-hmm. So from Henry, from your perspective in terms of strategy, and again, like this is not only what to do, but also what not to do. What is your catch? What is your perspective on this culture case?
Look, I think Jay put it really well. Culture eats strategy every day of the week, because it sets the tone. I think we have to be realistic. Human beings like to have their own little way of doing stuff. And I recall again way back when enterprise was planning integrated product management for CAD systems and everything else, and boiling, I can't remember, I think it was 3,500 systems down to about 4. It was all about the change management and what was the context within which people were operating. So that was number one. Number two, it always is about the what's in it for me. I'm afraid that people listen to, if we still had FM as a radio instead of digital, I would say people will listen to why FM, what's in it for me. So if you can understand how it helps the people to actually do their job better, and there's not that perennial fear that, oh, hang on, I'm going to lose my job if I do this or whatever it is. And you can basically show what it enables you to do a lot faster and a lot better. Then you have, a piece of the mindset. What you always need to bring back, though, is what are the implications for your business of things going well, that allows you to plan, right? And of things going badly. So I'll give you things going well. So for instance, if I look at insurance, if you can basically either do, for instance, claim fraud detection, and you have a better way of understanding whether it's a fraud or it's not a fraud, that can save a lot of money to the business, which is good for you. But actually, if you think about it, it's also good for the customers. Insurance is, you basically have claims. If the claims go too high, then I'm afraid you have to increase the policy premium and the cost of it. So if you do it correctly, great, everybody wins. If you do it badly, then you get sued, because of course you basically said, hey, my claim is invalid, and now I'm going to sue you because you're not paying me. So in essence, getting the governance right, getting the culture right, and then getting the foundations for that, because there's no going away. Whether, in the 70s and 80s, it dates me here, we were writing algos for decision systems, and then there was fuzzy logic that was in the 90s, fuzzy logic, and now we basically have very large power. Why? Because the compute powers drop like a brick. So now you can do stuff that 10 years ago you thought this is crazy, but that ability, without the right culture and the right governance framework around it, will lead to either incredibly good or incredibly bad outcomes. But who knows which one is it going to be for your organization? So start from the foundations, make sure that the data repository, the cleanliness, the governance, and so forth are there. Then build from there then the next step is you need to think about what's the architecture that you will need to utilize, and I mean technical architecture here, that you will need to be able to take advantage of that incredible power.
Mhm.
And with new architecture or different architecture comes costs, and of course comes back to governance, because now you've opened up a whole bunch of things and access to stuff that, GenAI is very good at finding stuff. Before that you were searching for 4 or 5 keys, or maybe you use an LP to kind of expand the search around what you mean. But now it's pretty good at finding stuff that you didn't expect it to find, right? So all of these things come with it, but we should not be scared of it. We should embrace it, but we should embrace it with our eyes open on the baseline of what needs to be done. I recall total quality management. Jay, I'm sure you'll remember TQM, right? What is it? It's basically a philosophy that you basically going to think about what's the cost of non-conformance before you do stuff, and you basically build quality in everything you do. Well, you could apply the same principles to what we do now. I mean, we can come up with a new acronym, the three of us on this call, and we should probably trademark it afterwards. But essentially, it's the same principles.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's critically important, especially when you think about it. We are doing data quality work today. Almost every company in the world does data quality work, but they just don't call it that. In manufacturing, we do reporting consolidation, financial consolidation at the end of the month, which at the end of the day is the human side of trying to clean the data just for the analytical purposes. So I think that you had it exactly right. We can't be scared of it. There are things that you can take advantage of, especially in small buckets. Don't do big bang. That's probably going to not work. Focus on where you can in the areas that you know as best as you can with the data that you could work with. Yes, you need the governance structures. Yes, you need the architecture, technical and business architecture to get it done. Right. But don't be scared of it. You need to take advantage of what we've got and where things are going. But you can start small in areas that you've got real value in and grow it over time as you're building out the strategic foundations you need in place.
Mm-hmm. So, to follow up on that, what do you think? How, like, modern companies, since very often we're saying that the modern companies will be probably fueled literally by data, right? So, how they can empower or train the employees and their skills to take the ownership of the data quality? Are there any practical patterns you witnessed? Maybe this might be to you, Jay, as well.
For me, I've seen it done in different ways, and everything's based on the culture that's in play. Let's be straight and honest. When Henry and I went to school, we weren't taught about data specifically in many pieces. Most business people coming out of college today have way more data knowledge than we ever did, and the use of these tools. But we still have to find ways to be able to bring it out and do it. I personally use it by doing. I love use case development. I love working with the business to get them to do self-enabled tools and understand where pieces are going. But it is very dependent on the culture and how you can get people to learn the pieces that they need to do to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So it seems that we have a question from the audience, from Federico. How can organization identify and prioritize their dirtiest data for cleaning before starting AI initiatives? So this is the first part of the question. I'm not sure whether it's to you, Henry, or you, Jay, whoever can take it. So how can organization identify and prioritize their dirtiest data for cleaning before starting AI initiatives? Where would you advise to start?
I would start from what are you trying to get out of it first, because if you it's back to what we've discussed before in the preparatory call. What's the question, right?
Yeah.
So
What's the
what
question?
question are you trying to answer?
Yeah.
That's critical for your business, that enables you to do something that you really want to do, right?
Yeah.
If you start from there, then you look at what the data repository, what data do you have lying around, whether or not they're accessible, whether or not there are some data privacy issues, you throw the whole thing in the mix. And then doing small experiments quickly on those data will tell you whether or not they're actually sensible or not, with knowledgeable humans around them to actually see whether the outcome actually is good or not. And then from there, you can just work out which one is really just rubbish data and whether or not you need to buy some, augment it, do something different. That would be my take.
Yeah. And I'd agree. Don't look at your dirtiest data as your prioritization, because what that can happen is you could spend time, you could spend months, you could spend years cleaning up data that is not business valuable. You've got to really look at, again, what is the question? What is the impact that you need to do? Yeah, there are going to be data sets that you do want to use that are going to take the longest period of time. Absolutely. But it's all about business impact. And that should be where your prioritization runs. You will always be able to find AI pieces that you can do in subsets of the data that you have. But just don't look at it as this thing, because data cleansing is not an activity that's a one and done. It is a mindset. It is something that happens. We get it as clean as we possibly can, but especially in the manufacturing space, there's always more data. There's always changing things that are going to change. But focus on business impact and the questions you're trying to ask, and you're going to get to where you need to be.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you for the question from Federico. So basically, probably one of my last question to you is, about the future. So how do you see the role of data preparation evolving as AI technologies will become more advanced? And are there any kind of emerging tools or methodologies in the domain that, let's say, modern executives, organizations should be aware of? So maybe to both of you, to Henri, for instance, as a start, you kind of observing this market from many times. Do you see any trends currently that you would consider that, hey, this is something that could be important for modern companies?
I think the data that you have start to be a pretty good, an even better competitive advantage.
Yeah.
So if you can instrument the right things, and I mean the right thing, otherwise you're going to be drowned in stuff again. But if you can instrument the right things and have the right data, it gives you a competitive advantage. And you see that already now with the big, the big known provider, whether Gen AI or the type of AI tools out there, using that in a very broad sense of the word, where people, the cost of developing a new model is largely compute and data and training. So if you have data, that's one thing. Now, if you ask about the tools in the future, well, it's not the future, it's already being used, it's been used for some years now. It's the synthetic creation of data, where you deconvolute from a smaller set of data, a set of attributes, then you create a much bigger set of data that you train your model with.
Yeah.
And there you have to be super careful. It's like, when I was a scientist many years ago, you've defined a little square where your model is working really well. And then somehow you're extrapolating something which is kind of way off the screen, come somewhere, in someone else's house here. And it makes no sense. I mean, it will look great. It will still give you an answer, but it will make absolutely no sense whatsoever. So what I would say, when you look at synthetic data, you can't get around it now, because there are a whole bunch of things where you need to essentially remove some GDPR consideration, whatever, when you reconstruct, for instance, a customer profile, or in manufacturing, if you have certain type of machine tool data and you don't particularly want to share what type of material you use and you want to normalize. So there are a whole bunch of new tools there, but always get back to the basics. In insurance, if you look at our data, you might have 200 years of data for something. Look at that. Look at how the last few years have changed. Climate change is one of those, right? The last few years, is the old model regime still applying to the new regime? Maybe not, right? Things are changing. And then apply again back to the ground basics. And I think it's always worth in developing these new tools to ask the dumb questions, because usually they are not dumb. The only dumb statement is don't ask that question.
Okay, so this is also a strategy. Be brave to ask the questions about your data. Thank you very much, Jay. Thank you very much, Henri. It was a pleasure to talk to you. And yeah, if any of our guests, if you will have any question, please feel free to reach us or our guests on LinkedIn. We would be more than happy to answer your questions. And thank you, and see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Netguru, as well.
Thank you.